Hi there, it's Vanessa. Welcome back to my channel. I wanted today to go through the last few books that I got to in the month of November for Nonfiction November and let you know what I thought about them. The first book that I'm going to talk about is from my important pile, and that is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I really believe that this book and the story is so important to tell. What her cells have meant to science, her cells taken out of her cervix without her consent, have led to incredible medical discoveries, only possible because of her immortal cell line. Her cells were used in research that led to the polio vaccine, which saved millions of people's lives. Her cells have led to chemotherapy and anti-cancer drugs. They have led to HIV and AIDS drugs. They have led us to understand genes better and were instrumental in gene mapping. Her cells were used in research that led to the HPV vaccine, which prevents certain strains of cervical cancer. Her cells have gone to space. Her cells have been used in nuclear tests. Her cells were the first human cells to be successfully cloned. Before I read this, I had no idea about any of these things. So I really am grateful that I read this book, and it definitely belongs in my important pile. Big question that this book posed was the ethics question. This was a time before consent forms, before patient-client confidentiality, before HIPAA, so the world that she was living in was not one that was protecting her. Her cells were literally taken out of her body. She was ripped of her bodily autonomy to decide what happens to her body parts, and that has led to serious ethical questions that have changed the way we think about ethics in the realm of medicine. I think the story is at its best when Skloot focuses on the family of Henrietta Lacks. They were incredibly wary of talking to reporters, and Skloot got in with the family and really got to know them very well, where they could trust her. The most emotional aspects for this book is definitely the children. Their hard times that they faced constantly throughout their lives, I don't think there was one truly happy moment in this book, is really conveyed to us, and we really get to feel what living in their shoes is like. We can't discuss this without acknowledging that it has to do a lot with class and race. To me, Deborah's story, one of the daughters of Henrietta, it truly broke my heart and made me start tearing up in the library when I was reading it. It's kind of incomprehensible to me, the pain that this family has gone through, but to me this is a story that is so important that regardless of how sad and heartbreaking it can be at times, it is a story that we must all know. You are healthier today because of Henrietta Lacks, and that should astound you that you don't really know who she is, because it astounded me before I had heard this story. If you decide to read this book or not, you should at least go look her up. So I'll definitely leave the Wikipedia page down below. Know that there is an HBO movie coming out about it where Oprah Winfrey is going to be portraying Deborah, the daughter of Henrietta that I talked about. So that's another thing to look out for. The next book that I will talk about is March Book 3. This is the conclusion to the March series by Congressman John Lewis, as well as Andrew Aydin and the artist Nate Powell. I'll kind of run through some of the historical moments that are in this graphic memoir that you probably have heard about. The Birmingham church bombing, the push for a Voting Rights Act, which is accomplished in 1965, the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, Viola Liuzzo, as well as the 3 Corps volunteers, Bloody Sunday, the March on Selma. In every discussion about the March series books, I've talked about some of the things that I didn't know as much about that I learned about through reading this graphic memoir series. And what really stood out to me were 2 things in this book 3. The first being the federal government's reaction to the continuation of protests, especially President Johnson's real nervousness about having protests going on while he was trying to seek re-election. Kind of like the politics and the civil rights colliding. Congressman John Lewis also devotes a lot of time that I really valued to the women of the movement, including Fannie Lou Hamer, who had a television sit-down where she discussed some of the violence she has faced as a woman as part of the civil rights movement. Regardless of the election, it's unequivocally the result of the civil rights struggle. It's because of people like John Lewis that we have Barack Obama. Democracy is never a straight line, and progress is never a straight line. We must continue to make these laws become part of our actual woven society. Again, If you haven't read this series, what are you doing? You really need to get to it. The next book that I'll mention is Tomboy by Liz Prince. This book is a graphic memoir looking into Liz Prince's life growing up, her not fitting into the gender norms that society expected out of her. It was a lot about finding out who you are, which I think are themes that could resonate with a lot of readers. It's a quick, sweet read, it's very cutely drawn, and it has a lot of fun humor as well. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about Furiously Happy, and this is by Jenny Lawson. I kind of decided that I had read a lot of serious topics and I needed a bit of a break. So I went for this book, which was also going to help out my Read Harder challenge that I'm trying to complete by the end of the year. This book still deals with some heavy topics, specifically mental illness, as faced by Jenny Lawson herself. It does it in a very funny way because of the way she talks and writes. She finds the humor in all of it. She had lots of stories about marriage, parenthood, about her cats, about traveling. I definitely laughed out loud more than once while hearing these stories on audiobook. I found most rewarding learning more about her ideas about her mental illness and how she deals with it and how she sees it herself, more than I liked hearing about all the tangents that she would go on when she would be telling stories. I feel like that is just the way she writes and talks, and that's just a different sense of humor. So I understand why people love this book, but for me it was more okay, not really as memorable except for the mental illness discussions. I feel like I've had a really good time this month learning. Olive put up a video on her channel where she discussed reading for pleasure and is reading nonfiction pleasurable at all, and kind of what you take away from reading nonfiction, why you do it. For me, it is definitely to learn. It is definitely to hear about other people's perspectives and lives and how they see the world, to make my world larger, and I feel like I definitely did that this month. I learned about stuff I never knew before, like the Gila cell line. I learned about Turkey. I'd never read a book about Turkey. I will definitely continue to read nonfiction, definitely in the new year. I'm going to be taking a bit of a break from it in December. I'll get back to you with my December TBR in my next video. Thanks so much for watching this one. Bye bye.